Well, you're in for a treat today. You get to meet my friend Ping Lieu, who I met in prison in 2016 at a pivotal point in his life, at a pivotal point in my life. You'll also hear just a snippet of how his life is exemplary of exactly what Christ did, who took on our own debt and burden. And we don't go to great detail of that. That's for another podcast, but you will get to hear that he stepped in for his dad, who was incarcerated, and took some of his dad's time and put it onto his own time. You'll also just hear a guy who is surrendered to the Lord, who has gotten out of prison, who's married, has a child, and is doing some amazing things in the business world. And then you also just get a sense from him of what are some of the greatest needs that those men and women behind bars face on a day-to-day basis, from whether spiritual, physical, and even just this idea of the connectedness that gets changed when you go behind bars and you're disconnected from family, friends, and the outside world. So enjoy this podcast with Ping Lieu. Well, Ping, it is always great to see you. And so thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited about this, actually. I mean, our story has been sort of intertwined for a very long time. So it's really exciting for me to come back together and, catch up with you.
We're going to jump in right now, and then we'll come back out
Mhm.
and give some little history of your story, my story, whatnot. And you don't have to, if you don't know the dates, don't worry about it, because I don't know the dates. But describe for everybody here, what was the circumstance like when you and I met for the first time? And then I'll be glad to share from my perspective as well.
Yeah, of course. And I remember it's September 2016.
Oh my
'Cause
gosh.
it's such a big date for me. It has been such a important milestone for myself. So like that date is burned into my head. But yeah, so when we met, I mean, it was September 2016. I was about, at that point, 12 years into a prison sentence. So, I was incarcerated when I was 19 years old in California, and had just sort of passed through the system in sort of the typical way, right? In all honesty, I joined a prison gang. I, you know, did a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing while I was incarcerated. And right about that time is when I decided I needed to change my life. And I joined a program in prison called Defy, which brought entrepreneurship to those who are incarcerated. Right around that time, I was scheduled to be released in 2017. I'm like, I got to get serious. I need some marketable skills. I'm thinking about like a resume and like, how do I get my foot in the door? And I joined this program and I learned all these skills, but in between that program, they bring in volunteers from outside, to work with us on our interviewing skills and all the skill sets that we've learned throughout the class. And that's when you walked in, Jeff, and you came to visit. You were one of the volunteers there. We actually got paired up in an interview exercise, and and you asked me some pretty hard questions. Really, like, to the point. I think the question was, you're somebody who's incarcerated. You have this record. You don't have a work history. Why would I hire you over somebody who has more marketable skills? And it really stumped me. It really stumped me. I had no idea how to answer. And to your credit, you also came back. You're like, I have no idea how I would answer that either. We finished with that exercise, and 30 minutes later, you kind of came back around, and I was still stumped by it. And you said, "Hey, I was just thinking about that question still. I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was maybe you could answer it X, Y, and Z, right?" And for me, it really gave me pause, and I kept wondering, like, well, why is he still thinking about this? It's been 30 minutes. We're thinking about a different exercise. Why is this incredibly successful, person, this volunteer who I look up to, still spending time thinking about this? And for me, that was when the realization came that like this person saw me, this person felt like I was worth his time. And like that was the catalyst that sort of pushed me forward in like how I approach the rest of my life. So very big date, very, for me, very important.
Yeah, I get goosebumps thinking about it because I want to
Yeah.
be very clear on this podcast here. The reason for this discussion is not to talk about anything that I have done, so to speak. I just showed up. And so let me tell you from my standpoint what was going on at that time period. That summer, I had been under this long courtship to potentially become the CEO of Prison Fellowship because I had just left my financial career, and actually I was going to keep going in that direction, and then this opportunity came in front of me, and for somebody like myself who has had a deep passion for this, that would have been like me making it to the MBA, so to speak. And so I threw my name in the hat. But by the time I had seen you, I had been through like 6 months of grueling trying to get this job. Came down to me and another gentleman. Actually, the other gentleman got the job. And so I had known at that point that I was not going to be in that role. And actually, it was okay because I had some other things I was going to do. But still, it's never fun having somebody tell you, "Hey, you don't get this opportunity." But here's the irony: so that very day was the day that they were going to be announcing to the organization, or at least publicly, who the new CEO or president, whatever the title was, of Prison Fellowship. So I remember I was out in LA for work, and I just happened to have some time, and I'm like, well, let me go out with Defy and come in and go to this prison. In fact, I don't even where was that prison? It was outside of LA someplace.
Outside California City, right? About 2 hours
Okay.
outside of LA, I
Okay.
think. Yeah.
So we go out there. I don't know any of these volunteers, and but here's what I remember thinking. I remember thinking, wow, this is quite ironic. I'm going to be inside prison, talking to a bunch of guys, helping on resume skills, interview skills, and meanwhile, in theory, I could have been back at the home office being
Yeah.
announced of, being the new CEO. And so, and actually for me, it was like, you know what? This is really cool because I'd love to be in prison doing this. So it was kind of it was just I remember thinking like, oh, this is kind of a special day that they're getting a new CEO, which is awesome. And I'm going to be here doing what I love to do. And then lo and behold, you and I had that interaction. So let me fast forward because I'm not so sure I really understood what you just said. And so you reached out to me. In fact, I'm looking right now on my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So you reached out in August 28th of 2017. I won't read the whole thing, but it says, let me just pick this up. So you were released at this point. It says, as you can see, I'm blessed to have the opportunity to work so you were now working for Defy Ventures. I'm gonna keep going here. The reason I wanted to reach out to you is that I wanted you to know that you changed my life. Now, I remember reading this like, okay, and I didn't really know what it meant. I don't know if you received my
Yeah.
love bombs. So love bombs were notes that you all could send
Yeah.
to, and I did receive that after the event. But your spending the time to work with me on my interviewing skills really impacted me. It was such a small gesture when you came back to me and gave me more advice, but it blew me away. At that point, not many people have felt that it was worth their time to think about my well-being. That for you to genuinely care triggered a pivot point in my life. That was a point when everything turned around, when I started believing in myself that I was worth someone's time. That confidence snowballed into my getting out and transitioning successfully to me getting a job and believing I could do the work. Who knows what chain of events you set off in my life and where that will lead, but I'm extremely grateful to you. I think it was another 2, 3 years, we finally started to connect again, and dots started to get connected, and understood. In fact, there's a cool story around all that. But from my standpoint, first of all, I think I've told you this once. If that's why God planted a seed in my heart 34 years ago, and this is the only fruit that was ever came of it, it made all my work and time and effort in the prison system absolutely worth it. So I'm grateful that you reached out to me. But all I did was I mean, I didn't even know it did anything. I mean, I'm part of the way my brain thinks. And I remember meeting you. And one of the things I also remember telling you was, Ping, remember, you understand the value of a job because it's hard to get jobs in prison, as opposed to a lot of these people outside, they just take it all for granted. And so it was just one simple gesture that I had no clue that, boom, became a catalyst for you. And obviously, I'm sure there is plenty of things behind that that obviously fed into that. So describe a little bit, again, not to talk about me, but like for people, for volunteers, what was it that hit you that was so transformative?
Yeah, but that's so cool, right? Like I sort of as a quick aside, like just thinking about how like you went into that, you were interviewing for this role, you didn't get it, and like I'm just gonna spend time here, and some people will say coincidentally our paths cross, right? We know it's not coincidence, right? But I believe like there was a purpose there, right? And for me, you're coming in and spending time with me and telling and showing the love and the attention that like that I needed at the time, right? Like I just think back to your message or my message I sent you on LinkedIn, and then how I was so grateful for the things that had materialized following our interaction. I had a full-time job, right? I was hopeful. I honestly, when I was coming out, I was hoping I could get a part-time job at McDonald's or Burger King or something like that, and somebody would just let me in the door, and I would have been very grateful for that. But that I had a full-time role, and then thinking about where things have it's just so funny to look back now, right? Every few years I look back to that message and like, wow, look at all the things, that has materialized since then. And just before that event is when I actually decided to turn towards God, right? And so I started getting more involved with the ministry and started, attending church. And like in my first 10 years, I really turned away from it. And I was like, this wasn't the path, right? So I started turning towards God. I started turning towards the church, and then I ended up in Defy Ventures, and then our paths crossed, right? And then like these little stepping stones start getting laid,
Yep.
for me, and I don't even realize that there. I'm just believing and walking forward. And when I look at what my life is now and what it was 2 years ago and what it was when I was just released, I'm just so grateful for all of that.
One of the things and maybe it's in here, or maybe you mentioned it to me, but it's so powerful. I've heard you say this, and in fact, 30 seconds. So ultimately, how the dots got connected for me
Mhm.
was, this was around COVID time. I was on a webinar, and the CEO, I guess, of Defy Ventures was on there, and somebody had asked him, "Hey, what does Defy Ventures do? Give us an example." And so he starts telling our story, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm listening as a participant. I had no clue, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's talking about Ping." But either he said it or you said it. You mentioned your number, whatever your
Yeah.
so articulate that, where I'm going with that.
So, when you're incarcerated, it's the system is designed to tear you down, right? And take away all aspects of your humanity, right? Like we're not addressed by our names or like, all the little things that make us human, right? We're brothers, we're sons, I was inmate V43578 for 13 years. And all of that was completely taken away from me. I was inventory. I was, you know, just this thing that gets moved around as they saw fit. And over time, it's just sort of, you come to believe that, right? Like it gets drilled into you for 13 years. And I really believed that I had nothing to give to this world. Like
Mm.
I really believe that when I got released, I there was nothing for me to contribute, right? Um, it's I don't think I've said this story before, but I was an embarrassment to my family, right? I had I had no work experience. I couldn't provide for anybody. It's I just felt that I was completely worthless, and there were times when I questioned like, was it worth it for me, to even leave prison
Mm.
and get released? and so that really tore me down. But this experience that we've had with Defy Ventures, this experience that we had, like, when our paths crossed, just the time that we spent together, having that attention for somebody who hardly was present, and wanted to be there, really instilled that feeling back into me that, like, well, wait, there's at least
Uh-huh.
one person who thought that I brought value,
Uh,
right? To their time, to their 5 or 10 minutes or whatever time we spent together. It that was what changed it for me, right? That was the
mm.
catalyst when it's like, well, if one person believed, maybe I take another step forward, you know? And I didn't even believe it myself. And that's when I had to convince myself, like, well, if this guy believed it, like, I should, right? And I had to believe that I had value.
So I don't think I've ever shared this with you. People will
Mhm.
ask me, why do you, I've been doing this 34 years, not as a profession, but just as a deep passion. Like, why do you go into prison? And
Mhm.
I can give multiple answers because I don't really know the right answer. At one level is God planted a seed when I was 18, 19, and that's probably the real answer. But the human answer is I grew up with a dad, wasn't perfect. My dad was a workaholic, but actually he was at a prison thing with me just this last weekend. But one of the things that I grew up with a dad who would say, I believe in you. And so I will tell people part of the reason why I go in is obviously God planted the seed. But another thing is just to be able to tell people, I believe in you. And so you just said that. I don't even know they even said the words, but hear you actually articulate what I have said a gazillion times, and it's just shown up.
No, I agree, and, like, even in my day-to-day now, right, as I manage my teams and I manage my employees and they talk to me and they're like, "I wanna grow." Or they're just going through each day as sort of just a process, right? And, like, they are not present. I'm like, "I see you," right? Like, and like, I don't even know how to express, like, how much this permeates how I interact with anybody, but, like, making sure people know that I see them.
Mm.
My employees, I'm like, "Hey, I see you. I see your skill sets. I saw you push harder during, this time, and I really wanna work with you on how I can help you grow," right? And, like, sort of giving back, and, like, it's really, really made me believe in servant leadership,
Mm.
and I believe that's how I move forward just from all of these interactions.
So let's go down that path for a second because
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. And in fact,
Yeah.
what's so cool, again, we couldn't have orchestrated this. You end up getting married, and Shelly and I
Yep.
flew up. We were invited to the
Yep.
wedding. We came to the wedding. You all came down and visited us, down in Orlando at one point. You now have a child. You've been very successful in your career. You've since moved. Anything that you can, I mean, look, from a worldly perspective, which it's more than this, you look at what you have and what you've accomplished, you're like, dude, this guy is absolutely successful. Anything you would add to that? Because I just think it's a great story of where you were and then where you are today. And then I think it's also important to note in that time period, uh, I mean, you've been there for me uh, on phone calls and checking in so while we get into this conversation, unfortunately, around incarceration, that's not the basis of our relationship at all. So, but anything you can add to just how you have grown and how you've been able to accomplish the things you have, equally being a husband and a dad, and anything there you could just chime in.
I'm incredibly happy for where things are today, and for so many reasons. For the longest time, I didn't dream about having a family. I didn't dream about getting married. I didn't, a career was out of the question. But the last, oh god, how many years has it been now? It's 2026 now, so 9 years since
Wow.
I've been released. Yeah, I just think that I've been incredibly blessed, right, for, believing and walking the path, and, I'm incredibly grateful. I met a wonderful woman. I have a 2-year-old son now who is, I mean, he's the highlight of coming home every day, and he's the reason why I go to work every day, and, when I look at where I'm at now, and not for, you know, I am the director of operations for a tech company. We're recently valued at $6 billion now. And not, just to give a sense of, what I've been blessed with and what
Mhm.
I'm doing. And, it gives me the opportunity to work with so many people, right? We are a 22,000 person company at this point. When I joined, we were a 2,000 person company. And this was 3 years ago, right? And so I get to touch so many people's lives and lead, and, the motivation that was given to me, right? Like with this second chance, like I'm able to reach so many people in this role and tell people like, I believe you can make, like, I can tell people I don't have a I don't have a degree, right? I don't have a bachelor's degree or traditional education. I don't have the traditional path. When I share my story with people, they're like, I can't believe like this is you. And I believe in transformation. I believe that any life can be touched, right? And this just gives me, it's just such a blessing to be given like this opportunity. When I look at all of it, I've literally stopped setting expectations for myself and just being present every day.
Ugh.
Because when we go back to 2016, I could never have predicted my life has taken the path that it has in the last 9 years. And at this point, I've just grown accustomed to just being grateful, you know? And whatever comes tomorrow, whatever gets placed in front of me tomorrow, like we will, I think that it was, we'll navigate that, right? But it's I stopped planning my path and you know, just letting it be placed in front of me. So it's I think that's a blessing for me for sure.
Just to show that this is a equal relationship here. It was so cool for me as you moved down to Texas. One of my colleagues was down in is down in Texas, and so he, I was the two of you have connected, and he kind of helped you, I think in some of the areas or whatnot. But then one time I was talking to him, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I saw Ping the other day," and you're just like, and so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so cool how these the stories and the relationships have. I mean, there's more stories and relationships that have crisscrossed in our lives as well, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I wouldn't have dreamed of as well. What do you think because look, I've met many guys who've been incarcerated, and I will say they don't. I don't. I mean, I have relationships, but not like you, Ping. What do you think, has made your journey different, unique, since you've gotten out? I mean, anything that you would share with men and women, whether they've been incarcerated or not, of how you've been able to be, uh, get back on the right path, be successful, whatever. Have your head screwed on straight?
I think it's the belief that I belong, right? Nobody is outcasted. Nobody is like, just because of your path or your past, or it's something we've done, other people have forgiven us. A lot of us have not forgiven ourselves. I think that holds a lot of us back in that, like, we walk into rooms and like, well, these are executives. I'm talking to the C-suite now, or this is a conference room. I don't belong in this room, right? And I think for myself, it keeps coming back to that point, but like our that intersection of our lives, it keeps coming back to that. It's that 15 minutes that we spent together told me, you know, this air that we breathe belongs as much to me as it does
Yep.
anybody else, right? This space, these rooms, these meetings, like I belong there as much as anybody else, and my contributions matter just as much, right? It's like that moment has really drilled that into me, and I think that belief, right, that trust has really gotten me further than I think most people, because I think we let our past hold us back, and I think knowing that we're forgiven, right? Knowing that the only person that doesn't forgive us is ourselves, and we got to get past that.
Even as you talk, I can remember you calling me, you know, you had a meeting or whatever with this
Yeah.
CEO, and literally was walking through that going, "No, you belong. You're there." And
Yeah.
so Yeah, it's amazing to think. Look, and it's no different for me. I mean, I get nervous, concerned, whatever, and so it's great to have a friend, and let alone, w- you were there for me at a low point in my life, and actually turned about to be a high point for you, and so it's quite cool. Where would you say you're at spiritually these days? Is that still a big part of your life, and is that carrying you?
For me, I think it's such a personal thing for me. My wife grew up a little bit differently, and so we share in the same faith, but just difference in
Yep.
intensity. So it is very much a, you know, my path. And so obviously I still think my spirituality and my faith is strong. It's been tough finding a community in a new, in a
Yep.
new city, in a new place. But I think it always brings me back to, I wouldn't be where I am without my faith, without God, without
Mhm.
my spirituality. So it always remains strong with me. And I am, hopefully like my son also carries the same, faith.
If you were talking to a volunteer who, let's say, is going to go into prison, they've never been into prison or whatnot. What are some of the what are some of the physical needs, maybe spiritual needs, as somebody who's incarcerated that maybe those of us who've not been incarcerated don't fully understand?
It's hard for I am fully aware that I was very blessed to have support from my family as well. But I think there are a lot of people who are currently incarcerated who are honestly just they're fighting for their next meal, right? The system doesn't feed them enough. They have no family support, so being able to go to commissary, buy food or anything like that is a tough challenge. So there are a lot of people are in prison or they're looking for the next hustle. I think that is the fixation for a lot of people. Well, how do I get my next meal? How do I get and so like thinking about the bigger picture, the long picture is a tough concept for people, right? Because they're looking at tomorrow. They're going meal by meal, day by day. And I think that is a big challenge for a lot of people, and you get stuck into that cycle. Not very many people look at the long game and think about like, okay, like, well, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 3 years? What do I want to do? What are my next steps when I get released from incarceration? Right? Who do I reach out to? Resources. I think myself as well, being, out for 9 years now, I take Google and ChatGPT and a lot of these things for granted, right? But like the limited resources for people who are incarcerated, they're limited to the prison library, print, whatever magazines or books that they have in the prison library, but that is their world of knowledge. So it's been really interesting, volunteering for Defy, and there are a lot of people who pitch their businesses and they're like, well, I'm thinking about maybe starting a restaurant that's sort of buffet style but burrito. I'm like, oh, you mean like Chipotle? And they have no idea what Chipotle is, right? It's really interesting, and it really paints a stark contrast to like, oh wow, like yeah, like this a lot of people who are incarcerated are not up to date or up to speed on what is going out on the outside world. And I think that is a tough one. I don't know. I know you spend a lot of time volunteering as well. I wonder like what do you see? Like what is on, your radar?
One of the things that I see, but I've become more attuned to it, is the disconnectedness that
Mhm.
somebody behind bars is generally to the outside world, but really where I'm going with that is friends and family.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I don't it's hard for me to fully understand. The one quick story is there's a guy that I know, and his son, it was so actually the husband and the wife both, one went into prison, one went into jail. It's a horrible thing. It shouldn't have happened. But this one of the I think it was the son, was really struggling with mental illness because mom and dad are not there. And so this individual, the dad, actually stole his cell phone or got access to his cell phone, made a phone call knowing full well that if he got caught, he's gonna be put in the slammer. But he didn't care because he had to get to his son because his son was in a crisis spot. So then he gets caught. So then he goes into the solitary confinement. And just listen to him to go, look, I don't know if my son's going to be okay. And I'm completely alone and totally disconnected. That's something I don't think that the average person fully recognizes. Does that ring true?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on so many levels. So I spent ooh, 6 months in solitary confinement. It is the most alone I've ever felt in my life. Because it is quite literally 23 hours a day. You're fed through a slot in the door, and like that is seeing somebody's arms from just the forearms down is your human interaction for the day, right? It's and you're alone with your thoughts and no access to phones or anything like that, and it is one of the darkest like times. I can count two times is when one I was on a prison transfer back from Mississippi to California, and I was chained up and we were put on a bus. My hands were chained to my waist and put in this plexiglass box that I could barely get air out of. And it was a 33-hour bus ride,
Ugh.
chained up in this box. No bathroom breaks or nothing like. And I think that was the closest I was to my breaking point. And there's nobody you can talk to, right? The guards, the transport officers, nobody will speak a word to you. It's I felt myself on the verge of a mental break. And then the other time was in solitary. There are many people who struggle, like even in when you're in general population, because it's hard to adapt, right? Like your family moves on, your friends move on. When you're initially incarcerated, the letters flow in, the phone calls flow in, but eventually people live their lives. They have children to raise and so on. The commissary funds dry up. It's a feeling of abandonment.
Yeah.
And I think that is the make or break point for so many people is that some people can adapt to that and they become callous to it and they shut themselves out from the outside world. And then there are people who can adapt to it and they really struggle. And that's when you see the mental illness and all that settle in. And I think that is the hardest part for so many people is that you do not have that support group anymore. Sooner or later, most many, 99% of your circle really, and even if it's not forever, maybe, it's you don't get the letter at once a week anymore. You get the letter every 6 months, and that is such a big struggle because feeling like you're abandoned by the outside world. Many people retreat back into that prison environment and go wholeheartedly into that, right? And that's when they, I've seen kids who go in who made mistakes and relatively, you know, decent people, not inherently like
Right.
evil people, but because of that feeling that abandonment, then they retreat into the prison life and then they get all the tattoos and then they join the prison gang and they start acting out of character, And it's I think that's the big struggle is reaching people, right? Reaching the community, reaching people, getting them connected.
I'm gonna act like I'm a literary guy, and I wish I was, but I think I got this right, where Dante talks about where hell is when, basically you can't connect the dots or you're totally isolated, and I had an experience, actually through what became steroid psychosis. They give me so many steroids prior to a back surgery, at the time of the back surgery and post, and I went into what's called steroid psychosis, and, there was a window of about 12 hours to 24 hours where, I was coming in and out of reality. But and this is I don't wanna go down this too far, other than say,
Yeah.
when I was in this state, I didn't know that I was in this state, but it was as if nothing around me was real, and I was totally alone in this universe, and so it really was the absence of God, and it was this disconnected, and I literally will tell you, and my wife has heard me say this a gazillion times, I wouldn't wish that feeling of complete aloneness on my worst enemy.
Yeah.
It was absolutely terrifying, and so sometimes I wondered, did I actually get to see what hell looks like?
That's
I don't
interesting.
care, it wasn't hot, but I'm telling you what, to think that you're in this world and nothing is real and you're completely isolated, was It was terror times 1,000. I don't know how to describe it. So it's an interesting concept of even what, prison can do. What's interesting too, though, is I have seen a lot of individuals where they get to that isolation point. Oftentimes, that's where God will step in and people surrender and they go, "Oh, you're there?" I'm a questioner by nature, and so it was almost like God had to take me to see the dark side. Because if he had
Yeah.
shown me his goodness, I'd have been like, "Ah, it's too good, I don't believe it." And so he's like, "All right, I'll show you the other side." And ironically, my faith became that much deeper because I experienced what I felt like was the absence of God. Did you see that happen a lot in prison? Not I mean, just where people get to their end, and then lo and behold, God shows up.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously definitely the other side, right? The way I see it is like you're in this pit, and then there's a choice, right? You look up, and either you see the light, or you look down, and you decide to dive deeper into it. And I've seen it on both ends, and quite honestly, I think inside, I've seen more people head down than they head up.
Really?
But when they look up, I think it's amazing. I have friends who have their own, faith-based podcasts now based out of San Diego, and just people that I've really connected with and who, like, really relied on as my brothers when I was, in my final years of incarceration, and really lives that really thrived, post-incarceration. You really get to see both ends of it, honestly.
Yeah. All right. So I'm trying to remember the podcast, and I've sent it to many people,
Mhm.
where you were interviewed with your story. And I think the only place I've seen it is on Spotify. Oh, it's called Ping Lieu on overcoming the death penalty. It's post
Okay.
traumatic growth is the podcast. I think they only made 2 podcasts or so. That is a
Yeah.
really powerful podcast of your story for people who want to hear it. I'm going to paraphrase to me the most intriguing part of it, and from my perspective, and I don't know that you even see it this way. Um, but essentially, you and your dad went to prison together, um,
Yep.
and at a certain point, which again they can listen to get more details. At a certain point, you recognize that your dad is struggling physically, and so
Mhm.
you go through attorneys or whatever, basically say, "Let my dad out and give me his time." Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Yeah, it is, it's that is exactly, it's he was incarcerated with me. I knew he was not gonna survive a long incarceration, and I asked for them to get him out as soon as possible, and I will take any plea bargain the district attorney offered.
Why that's so powerful is, I mean, there's so much reasons, but the gospel is exactly what Christ did for us.
Uh,
I don't know if you think about it a whole lot, but it's like he literally said, "Your sins, your transgressions, my sins, my transgressions, put it on me, and I will die. I will die for you." And that's exactly what you did for your dad. And I've told many people that story, and they sit there and they're like, I can't believe that this guy was willing to do that for his dad." And I don't even think you get it, do you?
I you know, it's funny, we've talked about it, a few times, right? And I just I've never looked at it that way, right? And I do I would never be so presumptuous to compare myself to Christ,
Sure,
right?
but
But it's
I can.
yeah. I mean, it's just, it's somebody I love, right? It's my father, it's somebody I love, it's my family, and it's what do I do to protect them, right? What do I do to make sure that they're okay? And he was saved from prison, and he was saved from, going through what I had to go through, and it was just something that was put on my heart to do.
I think this is why people need, why I think people need to know that story, because from my perspective, if there was one reason why you turned your life around and are able to do what you're doing. You said it earlier, you're servant leader. That's about as big as a servant leader as you lay down
Right.
your life metaphorically
Yeah.
and in some cases, for your, and this is your dad. That's not a normal response. And I know it's normal to you, but like it is so inspiring. And I'm grateful for your example. And I'm grateful for, I mean, obviously we've known each other a long time now. Your love for others, your unbelievably positive mindset, your faith. Look, you're exemplary beyond people who haven't gone through even what you've gone through. So just know that it's an absolute blessing obviously to be on this podcast with you, to be friends with you, and you know, I have a feeling I'm 52. Lord willing, the next however long I live, we'll be dialoguing. And if you could say anything to a listener of this podcast, which likely consists of obviously people who are either chaplains or in the prison ministry, in regards to working with incarcerated men and women, what would you say?
People who are incarcerated, people who are in position of that myself was in, like, we are not helpless, right? We are not. n- Nobody wants to feel like a pity or a charity case. I think really, really genuinely diving in and seeing the humanity in somebody versus stepping in and saying, I'm here to save you. Understanding the story, right? Understanding that we are all human and we're all here, I think is the biggest key to unlocking, you know, um, this community is, you know, yes, like we are here to save, but at the same time, it's a two-way street. We learn from, like, Jeff, you and I know this, right? Like, this is a two-way street. And I think remembering that, right? Like, there's so much to be learned from people who are incarcerated. And then the same way, the other way around is, you know, such a great way to build that relationship and unlocking that community. Yeah. So Jeff, I mean, I'm really curious. Like, you've worked with, this community for a very long time, but, what have incarcerated people taught you about grace and humanity?
They've taught me a lot. So that the best example I can give to you, I remember this would have been my freshman year at Wheaton or sophomore year at Wheaton. So when I was doing some prison stuff, I remember I was mowing a yard, and it's like God gave me this phrase, and the phrase goes like this: unless you can see yourself as an inmate, you don't fully understand grace. Now,
Mhm.
you and I talk about it, but I can tell you personally, there's not many people who have not been incarcerated who go, "Yeah, I see myself as an inmate."
Yeah.
And the reason why I would say that is, one, God impressed upon me, but then two, it's what you said. As you get to know these men and women, but generally men, a couple things hit you. It's like, oh, but by the grace of God, I'd be right there. But I think even more important than that is, so I don't know if you saw any pictures from Artemis 2, this last rocket or whatever.
Mhm.
There's a picture where they're behind the moon, so the moon is huge, and then you see in the distance Earth, which looks like the moon from our perspective. And so when I see that picture of this massive, massive moon that looks like the Earth in size, and then the small Earth that looks like the moon, it helps me think that's I'm looking from God's perspective. And
Mhm.
so actually, when I'm looking at that Earth way out there, it's beautiful and God created
Yeah.
it, but it's fundamentally broken because of sin. And so one of the things that God has impressed upon me is, this prison ministry. No, I'd actually say Christ was the first prison minister. He came down into this earth. Why? Because we could not follow the laws to purity, to holiness, to get to heaven. And so when you understand that we all are on this earth, whether we're really behind bars or whether we're behind our own bars through sin and our own thinking, we all are imprisoned. And so to me, the way you need some way to get out of that. And I believe that's through a relationship with Christ and his death on the cross. And when you view it from God's perspective, you see an inmate and myself
Mhm.
as the same thing. You look at the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah.
Jesus talks about, if you've looked at your brother in hatred, you've committed murder. I think I've done that. If you
Mm.
lust after somebody else, whatever, you've committed adultery. Yeah, I've done that. And that's not what the average person wants to think. When you see a Ping and all these other guys in there and you realize, oh my gosh, they're just like me. Yeah, they've made a bad mistake here or there, but I'm no different. So yeah, it has absolutely brought me to my own brokenness, my own humanity. I'm grateful. That was probably when I was 18 or 19. And I hope that I live, I'm not saying I always do, but I hope I live with that idea of I am, but by the grace of God, I'm fundamentally broken. And so just like you have those self-doubts of, am I taking up empty space and am I worth it? I mean, I've had the same questions and I'm not sitting behind metal bars. So the empathy and whatnot. So I think that's what a lot of my experience is. And then the other thing I would just say is, selfishly, I probably go into prisons as much for my own benefit. And I'll tell you
Mhm.
what that is to see, and I'm a junkie for this, to see guys transformed is living proof that there's a God to me. And so when I'm questioning and have, whatnot, to actually see people radically change, you're like, "Wow, that's a God moment." And so they've men and women behind bars have ministered to me more than I've ministered to them. And I don't just say that to say the right thing. I mean, I just was at an event this weekend, and to see what some of these men have gone through, to see the decisions they've made, and to see them radically change, you go, it's but by the grace of God, because it's so hard when you get these habits and patterns, and especially when you get drugs involved, it just becomes this grip on people. So yeah, that'd be my answer of how men and women who've been behind bars have absolutely transformed my view of God and myself.
That is awesome. Yeah. It's funny. It's you mentioning that, it's for myself, I get dragged down by my day-to-day, just work life and just sort of some days just really beating myself up. And then when I go inside as well, when I go in and volunteer and I see like this overwhelming positivity, right? Like these guys who are, yes, I have been there as well. I have been in solitary. I have been incarcerated. And yet so I know the feeling of despair, and yet they're so joyful,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But when we're there, it is so motivating. It is so renewing for my faith as well. And it's so funny that you brought that up because that rings so true for me.
Yeah. Well, and you said it just like you said, you see a lot of people look down, and it's true
Yep.
versus looking up. You can see it when you're in there, just like you can outside in the world. It's like those that are just looking down, it's a miserable place. Those that look up, look, it's still hard, but there's hope. I would love to see men and women like you're doing who get released
Mhm.
and who do amazing things. And I don't even mean make a bunch of money, but the amount of love and care for others oozes out of a guy like you. And it's just like God to use all of us sinners and to,
Hmm.
those that are broken, which we all are, to transform. And so one day I'd love to actually figure out how to get artists, get their paintings, get their music, get their preaching out of prison to minister to those of
Mhm.
us. Because I've met some amazing people behind bars. Yeah, anything you wanna say in closing?
For myself, it's this whole journey has just been about faith. And it's every day as things come up, it just keeps opening my eyes and it keeps making my faith stronger. And it's to me, it's I just could never have imagined just from that one moment. Just, yeah.
What a blessing to spend the last 35, 40 minutes with Ping. He is such a dear man. And my night tonight will be a much brighter just after chatting with him. And I think you'll find the same after you hear his story and learn about who he is. But I'm also excited too, as we continue down this podcast journey, looking forward to having chaplains on, looking forward to have other men and women whose lives have been transformed, not only by the gospel, but by also men and women who have gone in as volunteers. There's just so many parts of prison ministry and chaplains and what they do. I'm just excited to continue to let you hear from other experts and those who go before us, so that as we love on this population, not only can we make a difference in their lives, but be open to how God can transform our own lives through these interactions.